What did the Summer League performances of the three rookies mean for their future and the Jazz's future? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin. Excited to be back with you guys on Locked On Jazz. It's been a little bit. Watched the Summer League just like you guys did, and here to talk a little bit about that and a little bit about the upcoming future. You guys know me by now. I'm Leif Thulin. Been doing stats, Locked On Jazz, Locked On NBA Big Board. I'm excited and honored to fill in for David Locke once again on Locked On Jazz. Lifelong Jazz fan, credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Draft Combine, Utah Jazz broadcast assistant, statistician for the Jazz, lover of college basketball. So don't expect all the geeky numbers to be gone, to be gone. And I'll bring a unique perspective of someone who's been watching the team, covering the team, and also has watched a ton of these three rookies in the collegiate ranks, as well as every game they played in the Summer League. So excited to talk to you guys as always, and thank you for listening as usual. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is comment anything below. And today's question is, what are your year one statistical expectations for Cody Williams? Today's title sponsor and the show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. In the first segment today, we're going to talk about Cody Williams' Summer League performance, review that, outline what is a good season in year one and what that would look like, and estimate which roles will help him reach that highest potential, both immediately and in the long run. In the second segment, I'll assess Isaiah Collier's performance at the Summer League, outline what a good season is in year one for Collier, what that would look like, estimate which roles would help him reach the best potential as a Jazz man in his first contract, as well as just in year one, short and long term in that case. Same thing in segment 3 with Kyle Filipowski, assess his Summer League performance, which I think you're going to have a pretty high review on that one, and I was low on Filipowski. I'll get to that. We'll talk about what Filipowski's role is going to be for the Jazz and how it could change if John Collins is there. Could he play more? Does he look like Kelly Olynyk? All of that in the third segment. So we got a fun show lined up for you. Let's dive right in. Cody Williams, first segment right here. Cody Williams was picked number 10, and I and many others believe that was a steal. I had him 5th overall on my big board I posted for Locked On NBA Big Board, and in a recent episode with James Barlow, another host on Locked On NBA Big Board, I released a redraft. He did as well, and we each picked Cody 5th, which was quite a leap for James, who was low on Cody coming in, and for myself, kept him at 5. I say all that to say this. Cody impressed. Cody averaged 15 points per game, 55% from the field, 37% from 3 boards, 2.3 assists, generally good defense, was able to impact the game. I came away impressed. That's indicated by ranking him 5th, but that wasn't just me. James came in with valuable insights, saying he was concerned about Cody Williams coming into the draft. Had him 16th, I believe, and he moved up. So I saw Cody in person in Salt Lake, and like you guys, he was extremely slender, and he seemed a little bit hesitant on the court at times, but there were flashes. But overall, slight disappointment from what I saw in Salt Lake. Now we go to Vegas. Cody had a quiet 21, even with a loud play and a poster dunk in the first game in Vegas. What I mean by a quiet 21 is he did it within the flow of the offense. His loud plays, 2 dunks, 1 a poster with the left hand, were attacking closeouts in the flow of an offense, not, hey, this guy was picked in the top 10, let's hand him the ball. Let's get him shots and copious amounts of sets or isolations just because we need to see what he can do, and it'll look bad PR-wise if our top 10 pick doesn't have the ball in his hands. Well, what he did is he did it in the flow of the offense. He shot good shots, didn't shoot a ton, maybe even could have shot more. He shot good shots, knocked down open threes, attacked closeouts, showed off that the ambidexterity near the rim. You saw his ability to pass the ball at times, operate out of pick and roll. You saw all these little flashes that were enticing. They weren't large, and in terms of quantity, you may have wanted more, especially because of the efficiency with which he played. But I'll take those flashes and then some because his body's going to improve. He's going to get better. And he did this within a sustainable fashion. Sometimes players have big games and it's unsustainable because the play in the NBA is different from that of Summer League. Cody shot the right shots, passed when he should, and despite the thin frame, excelled at the rim, finishing authoritatively and ambidextrously. I said this about Cody pre-draft and will again, and I'll continue probably to say this for a while. All of his perceived weaknesses could be vastly improved by gaining strength and being healthy, aka not battling a facial fracture, an ankle injury, a knee. He has a knee contusion. All these things that he suffered at Colorado, and that's easier to be healthy and to put on weight eventually are easier to fix than any of the other prospects who had deficiencies, who are regarded similarly. Ron Holland can't shoot. Matas Buzelis can't shoot. Stefan Castle, I had him number one, but he really had the stats would dictate that he could not shoot at UConn. I think there was some nuances to that, but you get my point. Cody Williams shot 42%. Like I said, I think that was probably overly positive because he didn't shoot enough volume. But at least there's traits there. At least there's traits for driving. At least there's traits for athleticism. But he was just hampered by injuries and role definition and strength, all of which I think are going to get better and more clear. Furthermore, Cody learned to play with a slight frame, relying on guile and a lack of bounce at times with hurt ankle, and still finished well in college, which makes him more diverse and more well-rounded when the strength kicks in. Almost like a guy that grew up being small his entire life, learned to play the guard, learned the angles of shooting it high off the glass, and then he figured out how to make all those shots around bigger defenders. And then all of a sudden he grows to be big, and that's the constant talking point for commentators. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but if you learn to do it without the strength, then you put on the strength and you have all that finesse and skill already. I really buy that to be a successful recipe. I think Cody's weaknesses were entering the draft. He was a below the rim leaper, not a great shooter. Strength limits his versatility as a defender, all of which were correctable with strength being added, and his skills that are pluses get bumped even further in the positive direction with more strength added, like attacking closeouts. I think he becomes a better driver when he becomes stronger. He's able to use his body to create advantages. Maybe it allows him to become a better passer because of that same ability to use his body to create those advantages, use his size around the rim and his finishing ability to create opening passing lanes because people commit further help. These are just minor things you have to evaluate. And Cody Williams showed those flashes that had me salivating. If I'm a scout, I watch him and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is great. And the Jazz got someone I think is really good at number 10 pick in what's perceived to be a weak draft. Now let's touch on expectations for the actual season. I believe Cody should be a rotational player from day one and will experience struggles at times and have a more, but I think he'll have more legitimate, tangible flashes of success than Hendricks or even Ochai Agbaji in the last two seasons as the respective rookies on the wings. And they had success, but they had it post their G League stints. And I don't know how real those flashes were. In the case of Ochai Agbaji, he was 23 by the time he really started to shine in April of his rookie season. And people said, well, he's untouchable along with Kessler and Lauri Markkanen. Like that was the big three that were untouchable. Well, clearly Agbaji wasn't valued too much the next year as Bryce Sensabaugh, opening the pathway for him, became more important than keeping Ochai Agbaji. I was skeptical of the Ochai flashes. Hendricks, I think there's some real because he's really big and athletic, but I think Cody's going to have a more legitimate. If he flashes, I think it'll be more legitimate and more impactful because what Hendricks did was he hit open shots as the dare shooter, and he was a good rim protector as a weak side defender. I don't think he was really a great on-ball defender, which is what the hope is. That would be really impactful. I don't think he's quite there yet. Now, am I sure he gets a G League stint or not? I don't know. I could see him doing that, and they give him some ball handling. I could see him being featured on the Stars and mostly just for reps on the ball and building confidence. But I also think he's going to play more earlier than both Hendricks and Agbaji did. Instead of floating on the perimeter, I think it could be useful for him to be a ball in hand facilitator alongside some other players on the Stars, maybe if Collier's there as well. I could see it, but I do think he's going to play pretty much from day one on this Jazz team that I don't think has any true indications of winning. I said this prior to the draft that Cody has more potential in my eyes than Zachary Risache, who went number one. But and I can still see that. But what I foresee, and biasedly so, what I want to see from him is him becoming a guy who develops the shot a little bit further, defends well, and is a jumbo size 2 guard at 6'8", who averages a well-rounded 15, 5, and 5 on a team that eventually finds its Class A Tier 1 dude. And by the time Cody hits his second contract, I want to see Cody's development not necessarily be rapid, but be steady. And obviously, he'd love by year 2 to be at the same point his brother is Jalen. But Jalen came in a couple years older. And if you could get to where Jalen is right now by year 4, Jazz are singing to the heavens. They're thrilled. I don't know if that happens. I think Jalen's unbelievable. I think Jalen's an all-star. But, that's a trajectory that you'd hope to emulate. I think 15, 5, and 5 on a team that's starting to find their bearings and truly compete as they hopefully find their star, whether it's via trade or via this upcoming draft or the next one, which are both loaded full of star talents. That's the type of player you want drafting at 10. And like I said, I think he has more potential than Reece Sachet, but what I'm hoping for is that steady growth. Coming up next, we'll discuss how the 29th pick, Isaiah Collier, has performed in Summer League, short and long-term expectations, and more. But first, let me tell you about Gametime. Have you guys ever been to an MLB game? Because I have, and they're awesome. It's never been a better time to go than now because of that, because of Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the MLB, which makes getting regular season and playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on Gametime, they actually might go down the closer it gets to tip-off, and that's pretty rare. I've been in the ticket market recently looking at different events, and I bought them ahead of time, and part of me regrets because I believe Gametime will end up having a better deal than what I got on Gametime, and it already was a great deal. But I just wanted to make sure I got the event. You could do it either way, but make sure to peruse the market, see what you like. They'll have up to the market, the best deals that you can have. They also have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. I did make sure to use that, and it was entirely what it was advertised to be. Worked like a charm. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. They have great, easy-to-find and buy MLB tickets for every kind of event in your area. And I just bought tickets to the U.S. Open tennis. I love me some tennis. I'm going to the U.S. Open. And using Gametime, I made sure to peruse the views from all the seats in the venues and make sure I got the best seats in the house. And I made sure to get that price match guarantee as well. Gametime allows you to get a panoramic view from your seat and in the app before you buy. And I can tell you it's worth it and truly know where you'll be sitting. And Gametime also is a cool feature that, like I said, will give you a price match guarantee, or they'll give you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA, MLB, even U.S. Open tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you guys watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All righty, welcome back into Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin. I love talking to you guys about this stuff. So the draft happened. I came away thrilled. I think most of you guys were pretty happy. Isaiah Collier, 29th pick. I was thrilled to see him there. He was picked 29th despite being the top player in the class in the high school. We all know that. That's great. But what did he show for the Jazz in the Summer League? And what does that mean? That's what we'll address right here. Collier, for what it's worth, I had number 12 on my big board heading into the NBA draft. So I emerged thrilled after the Jazz selected him at 29. And then I left Summer League pretty impressed as well, in Salt Lake, that is. And then Vegas Summer League, you saw a mixed bag. I mean, let's just call it what it was. You saw flashes, but you saw a lot of turnover. You saw some questionable decision-making, typically traits you don't associate positively with a point guard. But Collier was impressive in areas that you can only see when watching the games and not box score watching. What I mean by that is he puts pressure on the defense. It's almost incessant pressure in a way you can hope can be harnessed. What he does is he makes the defense pay attention the entire time. And some players don't command that respect, and he does. And he did so instantly. In the very first game of the Summer League, in the Salt Lake Summer League, the second half, the Jazz made the comeback against the Grizzlies, against Zach Edey, and they weren't looking particularly good, really struggled ball handling at times. Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh turning the ball over. Well, Isaiah Collier came in, stabilized, as well as just put the team on his back, attacked the rim, got the Jazz good shots, and the Jazz ended up making a come-from-behind win and winning in overtime, actually using an Elam ending, which is pretty interesting. But you hope he can harness that aggression and that innate ability to put the defense under pressure and kind of take it to the next level as poise and maturation set in. You hope as he matures and the poise comes in, he'll be able to keep the defense under that pressure, but also be able to distribute with fewer turnovers. You don't want to like saddle him and say we're going to take this away, because those innate unteachable traits take over and show you something that you don't see selected at 29 often. That's why you should be happy. You should be more pleased than bummed by those turnovers, because he's willing to take the chances and make those things happen. The reason he gets into those positions is because he's got this innate ability to put pressure on the rim. He's also, I think, one of the best the passers in this class, even though he had turnover issues at USC. It's because he commands a ton of attention, gets into tough areas, and his team had no shooting at USC, but he made passes that very few other players in all of college basketball and the NBA draft could make. And you saw that all on display in Vegas. Collier at the Salt Lake Summer League, for a statistical perspective, averaged 11.3 points per game on 48% from the field, 33% from deep, 75% from the line, 3.3 rebounds, 3.3 assists, and just 1.3 turnovers per game. That's pretty good. In 4 games in Vegas, Collier averaged 11.8 points per game on 44% from the field, 9%, just 9%. That's not good. I'm not going to sugarcoat that one. 60% from the line, also not particularly good, averaging 4.5 assists to 4.3 turnovers. So just above a 1-to-1, along with 3.5 boards and 2.5 steals per game. The stats do tell you volumes in the sense that he gets the rim and shoots a lot of free throws and is a good finisher, but also tells you the defense is daring him successfully to shoot the ball. And when he does, the defense ends up winning that bargain. And he's not really a threat off the bounce from 3, nor as a catch and shoot shooter from 3, but that's less important as the catch and shoot, as he'll likely have the ball in his hands. Collier's swing skill and his development will be, and it'll determine how good he is in the NBA, is obviously shooting. But his athleticism, strength, he's very, very strong. He's rugged. He's tough. And his overall ability to put pressure on the defense and make unique passes. And I emphasize the word unique. He makes passes that few others can make because he puts himself in positions that few others can get to, especially at the Summer League. But even at the NBA level, I think his rim pressure is pretty unique. It's not something you see every day. You definitely didn't see it much in college. He was very much like blatantly, when you watched USC play, and didn't matter who they were playing against, you were like, oh, that guy is the premier athlete on this court. And he's the guy who you can see was recruited to be this guy. Yes, he had turnover issues. Yes, that team was not as good or functional as you probably should have been with the talent level they had on their roster. They were dysfunctional, but you were able to see he stood out. Same way that Gigi Jackson stood out to me. South Carolina was terrible, absolutely awful, and yet he was a crown jewel. He just looked different than everyone else, and he was so much younger. And yes, he had issues shooting the ball. He had inefficiency questions, but you just saw it. Collier, not quite to the same level that with Gigi Jackson, but he's got something about him that's different than others, and he makes those unique passes. He puts himself in position to make passes that no one else can create. The advantage is to create that possibility of a pass. Collier, to me, is the player that with the most physical ability to be ready to play for the Jazz in the regular season of the Jazz's 3 rookies, in terms of his body will maintain in the NBA. He'll be able to compete on both sides of the ball. He'll be able to get to the cup. He'll physically be able to defend. I don't know if he'll be a good defender, but he physically will not be compromised on that side of the court. Now the question will be, will his growing pains be more prominent and emphasized and apparent, just as Keontae's issues were tossed into the light more frequently than that of other players who are struggling because he plays point guard? Decision making is a paramount at point guard. You have to be good with the ball. And Keontae had turnover issues and he was fed to the dogs. Yet when he scored 30, the question was, well, will he be able to be the point guard of the future? Yeah, I totally understand. The point guard is the position that I want to be shored up. And the big wing is probably the one that you want to have you be your franchise star. But next to that, you really want a steady point guard. You want someone who can be entrusted for a decade, ideally. And you have the talent at the point guard position. Like the reason the Jazz fans felt so confident with Mike Conley when the Jazz got him and they felt the need to go get him is because of the safety net he cast. The reason he's such a good mentor for Anthony Edwards is there's this safety to Mike Conley handling the ball, even though Anthony Edwards is the star, undeniably. So is that stress of being so his growing pains will be so apparent because if he has a turnover day, he'll be like, well, Isaiah Collier's not ready for the NBA. He turned it over. So does that make it easy for him to play? I don't know. Or do you put him to the G League and accelerate the process for which the game will slow down? I know that's an oxymoron, but essentially, as you give him more reps with the ball in his hands, the game will slow down. And when the game slows down, typically players start to play better basketball. They make the right reads, they make the reads more quickly and more accurately. I don't know. I think what's going to happen is he'll play a lot in the G League and dominate it. I really think he's going to be good in the G League, and it'll help him become a more productive and less turnover prone player in the NBA by having some of those games where he's awesome and then some games where he's bad in the G League because he handles the ball too much. But you don't want to take away that courage, that the ability to go after the rim and stuff by saying we can't have you making those turnovers at the NBA level and having those expectations. So my expectations for Collier are as follows. I expect him to dominate in the G League and play sparingly to start the season as he works on limited turnovers and then be the second unit point guard for about half the season. I think he'll be playing significant minutes as the second unit point guard for about half the season. I will acknowledge that Collier's playing time will depend some on the amount of time Jordan Clarkson spends on the Jazz, as I can see him playing more from the jump. I thought JC would be gone by the start of the season, but I don't think that happens right now. Who knows? But I could see him playing more from the jump if Jordan Clarkson isn't on the roster. That just makes sense. But if JC is there, then is dealt at the trade deadline. Obviously, minutes would be vacated, but more importantly, it would indicate growth seen by Collier and just playing more and more basketball. Hopefully, would create growth and instill belief for Isaiah Collier to have some of those minutes be his minutes and his minutes where he handles the ball as the Jazz play stress-free games, but he can work on his individual growth and the Jazz can work on cultivating the youngsters for the future. By the end of the rookie contract, I expect Collier to be a player who makes himself part of the franchise's future plans, meaning he's good enough to be weighed into consideration of how the Jazz want to compete and who they must keep. I think that means he's a player who threatens to be a starter, and the dynamic of who is preferred between he and Keontae, or a future point guard, whether it's via trade or it's via the draft, will be interesting to monitor. I'd guess Collier will score about 12 points and average a few assists per game, and hopefully is better than that. Is he has potential to boom. He has potential to boom more so than a lot of players in this draft by year 4. So that would be my prediction that I feel decent about. 12 points per game, a couple assists, puts himself into the conversation as the Jazz hopefully position themselves to be picky. Positioning themselves to be picky like the Thunder were, saying Josh Giddey's a fine player, but he doesn't factor into our future plans because he's a little redundant with players that are better than him because they have the wealth of really good young players. I hope the Jazz are at a similar position. And Collier, I hope he's awesome, and I hope the Jazz keep him. But if he's good, like I just projected at 29, the fact that that's the discussion's a good thing. And that's kind of what I anticipate for Collier. I don't expect stardom, but I expect a solid player, and I could see stardom. In the final segment, we'll evaluate the Summer League and the future for Kyle Filipowski. But first, a few messages in the interim. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin. We're rounding out the rookies here, and the final rookie the Jazz selected was Kyle Filipowski with the 32nd pick out of Duke, and he had a spectacular Las Vegas Summer League. He had a super loud performance in the finale, and I think he demonstrated he is far more adept at the 5 than at the 4, which seemed to be difficult for him to navigate in that brief trial, and I would say mostly Salt Lake. I think the first game of Vegas. Funnily enough, I compared Kyle Filipowski about 2 years ago to Kelly Olynyk, and right as he started playing for Duke. So not quite 2 years ago, but 20 months ago. I said, best case scenario is Kelly Olynyk. And I voiced skepticism that he was as good as Kelly was in college when Kelly was at Gonzaga, and he would have a very difficult path emulating Kelly when he reached an NBA, whatever team he landed on. Well, now I think the Jazz saw what Kelly could do under Will Hardy offensively, and they'll try to replicate that success and get that from Kyle Filipowski. I was critical of Flip as I think his shooting indicators that many spoke of positively were fool's gold, as he shot just 28% on uncontested catch and shoot threes in his sophomore year at Duke, and he struggled to protect the rim. I was critical of him, fully acknowledging that. However, I will acknowledge there is an undeniable skill from the coordination standpoint, and the game looks easy for him at times in terms of how adept he is at stuff that is rare for bigs to be good at, especially as a rookie. What I mean by that is he's good at dribbling. He's good at navigating tight spaces with the dribble, creating passing lanes from awkward angles, not just at the spots that the bigs typically pass, not when they're premeditated passes in the scheme of the offense. He can improvise and create good passing. He can score. He is reliant on a spin move. I will say that he needs to diversify that game, but you see this coordination you typically don't see, and the NBA spacing seems to have benefited Filipowski versus what he did at Duke. In Salt Lake, Flip was bad. He was struggling to guard and missing a lot of jumpers. Vegas, he shined. Difference, he played a different position. Flip averaged 16.4 points per game on 46% from the field, 38 from 3, largely aided by 2 really good games, but you can't blame him for that. 70% from the free throw line, 6.8 rebounds per game, and 2.4 assists. Those numbers alone, the early returns would say this is overwhelmingly positive. And the Jazz fans should be bullish about Filipowski and what he brings to the table. And I'm right there with you. Flip is a 5 on offense and a 4 on defense, where he vastly improved since having a hip surgery in between his freshman and sophomore year at Duke. They nicknamed him two-hip Flip because the first year he was playing with a hip injury, and in the offseason he had the hip surgery and became significantly better athlete by all accounts. And I think you can see that based on the way he finished out the year at Duke and the way he played at Summer League, moving far better than at times when you watch him at Duke closely. Two-hip Flip, though. The one issue I see of him playing a 5 on offense and a 4 on defense is the Jazz have another guy that plays that same style, and I think it's detrimental. Well, John Collins is a 5 on offense and a 4 on defense, and I foresee him being a bit of a roadblock for Kyle Filipowski. That's not the worst thing in the world, but John Collins, ideally, if you ask Danny Ainge and you give him truth serum, I think he'd say we want John Collins and Jordan Clarkson on different teams to start the year. Or at least John Collins and maybe Jordan Clarkson move him at the deadline. Now, I don't think any team's going to make that deal, and it becomes harder to deal these guys, and it becomes harder to be as bad as the Jazz would have to be to get into the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. You know, that's aside from the point, but back to Filipowski is I think a lot of his early career is going to depend on who's in front of him, and especially this rookie year. If John Collins isn't there, I think Filipowski has a pathway to success with some obvious growing pains, but a pathway to success. So Flip, I expect to spend plenty of time in the G League, start to come into the fold more prominently come trade deadline, when I expect Collins and Clarkson are presumably dealt, if they're not dealt sooner. My long-term expectations for Flip hinge on how much better of a shooter and how reliable he can be as a shooter, because we know defensively that it'll likely be a tall task to stay on the court in that regard. If that were his only skill set to hang his hat on, you wouldn't see Filipowski on the court because he's not a great defender. Does that mean he's a terrible one? No. Once he's in the NBA, could he be exposed more? Probably. But I say that to say he's got to become a better shooter as the swing skill, not defense. Defense, I think you're either a good defender or you're not, and you can improve, and the good defenders can improve to be great, average ones can improve to be good, and you can become bad to less bad, but I don't think you become good from being bad. There are examples where that could happen, and even Taylor Hendricks could be one of those, where I don't think he was a good defender last year. If you watched him play basketball, I think that was theoretical that he was a good defender, and he took those challenges at the end of the year because that's an effort to make him a good defender, but he has the physical tools to be a good defender. So back to Filipowski. We know defensively it's likely not going to be the prettiest thing, but it's about shooting. If he shoots well, I think he has a spot in the NBA for a while because he's got a lot of skills with the ball, and he's going to be able to pass. He's be able to space the floor if he shoots the ball well, and that offense is becoming more and more valuable. So I expect Flip to carve out a role as a player who has a solid NBA career and is probably a long-term backup, a la Kelly Olynyk. Like I said, first year, I think he's going to play largely in the G League, play sparingly in the first half of the season, play a lot in the second half of the season, especially if John Collins is dealt in the middle of the season. Let me know what you guys think. I really think this is a modest prediction for all these guys. I think all of them could exceed the expectations, and all obviously could be under, but I don't think this is too much of a homer pick. I'll never deny I always am going to be a homer about the Jazz, but that's what makes it fun because I've got the same passion, the same longing for the Jazz to hit on all these picks, the same longing for the Jazz to have a championship contending team. And yes, this is going to take patience this year, but I'm all along the ride, so I've got that same perspective. So let me know if you guys want different sort of episodes because these are all building for the future. And I think it's important to evaluate the players for what they did in the Summer League, but say and contextualize that the NBA is different than the NBA Summer League and tell you how I think these guys' careers will unfold, both from the first season, the first time they touch the court, to the end of their first contract as Jazzmen. And hopefully they get re-signed for long and awesome futures with the Jazz. But I just wanted to lay out the groundwork and the expectations and give you some takeaways from Summer League and what matters and what doesn't. But also, I wanted to tell you guys about Locked On launching their first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On Plus, our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you guys for listening to Locked On Jazz, making it your first listen. With your next listen, tune into Locked On NBA. They've got all the latest in the entire league. The association's always busy, so find out what's going on from the experts that host Locked On NBA. And I'm happy to be talking ball with you guys once again. I'll be back tomorrow on Locked On Jazz. So thanks for tuning in. And as always, go Jazz.